everybody, welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host Nick Olson. Nick, how are we doing today?
I'm good. Against all odds, the Vikings keep winning. 4 games now without Justin Jefferson, and they've won all of them. And this might be like the craziest Vikings game in recent history, which is saying a lot considering last season we had the Bills game, we had the biggest comeback in NFL history. But no, I think I think what Josh Dobbs did on Sunday is just about the most unbelievable performance, all the way up to the game-winning drive. But to start out with like the consecutive fumbles and then the KJ Osborne or the safety and then a fumble on third down and then the KJ Osborne injury and another strip sack on like the drive that came after that at the beginning of the third quarter. Like everything was going wrong. And by the way, the run game wasn't working. Somehow they cobbled together an incredible comeback victory. It was awesome to watch, just like from a fan perspective. Everything went wrong, and yet everything kind of beautifully still managed to come together. So I'm excited to dive into it with you. How you
Yeah,
with that? How you
absolutely. I
doing?
mean, like the symmetry is insane, right? Like 10 years ago, I guess was when the Josh Freeman game was almost exactly like it was the same week of the season of the Josh Freeman game. And now we have the Josh Dobbs game, which honestly, the first couple snaps for Dobbs kind of looked like it was going the Josh Freeman game way. And it was you come into the game with some excitement around Jaron Hall, like we get to see what he can do on the field and like maybe hopefully we can cobble some offense together, and if the defense holds together, maybe we can get a close win. And then all of a sudden Jaron Hall gets injured. It kind of looks like a disaster, but it turns out to be awesome. It was a ton of fun to watch Dobbs do his thing towards the end of that game. Like it was just so cool. And I just not only going together and winning the game, but then all of the stories that come out after the game. You're like, this is just absolutely insane. And like everybody who's played football on some level is just like, this is absurd. Like I can't believe this guy came in and was somehow functional, right? So it's been
It's
awesome.
it, it's incredible. And the craziest thing is that Kevin O'Connell, by virtue of translating everything into the microphone that he has in his mic, and this just the stories you hear that coming out of this game that like, okay, like Josh Dobbs, what actually happened is like, okay, so Kevin O'Connell would relay the play call to me, and I would
Hmm.
relay it word for word, having no idea what any of these words mean, and
Yes.
then in the next 7 seconds before the mic cuts off at the 15-second mark before the play call, Kevin O'Connell would translate this into be like, oh, that's dragging a slant flat. Oh, okay, so this is just a stick concept. Hawkinson's going to have a good matchup if he's got inside leverage. Just throw it there or whatever. So, and then the mic cuts off. You get like one little snippet of
Hmm.
that, and Dobbs out there is like, okay, I guess I'm going to read stick or whatever. Which is like having no idea who any of these guys are, having no idea like the route depths or what these
Yeah.
guys are good at, zero chemistry and somehow it looks more competent than the Jordan Love Packers offense does. Like there were fewer miscommunications on the field. There were none, but there were fewer. So just the whole insanity of like it's like
It's
literally they plucked somebody off the street to go in there, like and just like I know you don't know any of the words or any of these people's names, but go out there, have fun.
yeah,
And
it's
that's kind of what Josh did.
absolutely absurd. He said to Brandon Powell before the game, which by the way, he mentioned Brandon Powell was one of the few players whose name he actually knew because he went to Florida and there's like a Florida Tennessee thing, right? Because Josh Dobbs went to the University of Tennessee. Um, but he said, yeah, I think I maybe threw a pass or two to Brandon Powell in warmups, right? He ends up throwing the game winning touchdown to him. Insane. Like, you don't know where these guys want the ball. You don't know anything with the timing of the routes or something like that. You've had literally zero reps because the Vikings were trying to get a fifth round rookie quarterback ready to start because their starting quarterback got injured, right? It's like Josh Dobbs had the headset on the sideline in practice, and that's where he heard some of the play calls, which were words he didn't understand. um, it's
So insane. It's the telephone, like telling everybody, like, here's what you're gonna do, and then like, okay, Kevin O'Connell, 5 seconds, tell me what I just said. Like, tell me the
yeah.
protection and the routes I'm running. Like, you don't have time to read any of that stuff. Just like, tell me where I should probably throw the ball, and like my second option, Kevin O'Connell can maybe tell you, like, look for this guy. So
No,
the fact that they got together an
it
offense is amazing.
it's like it turned into a total team thing. I think Dobbs said in his post game press conference too. The guys in the huddle were like, "Okay, this is what this means, right?" There's the video that came out of them on the sideline when Dobbs has to go in, and I don't begrudge the fourth down decision to kick that field goal at all, right? Because literally this guy's never taken a snap from Garrett Bradbury before. Like, you can't put that in the game immediately when it gets hurt. Maybe if it's your normal backup, you can go for it on fourth down, but that's just, your starting quarterback gets hurt in this situation, you just have to kick the field goal, right? Then immediately you see it cut to the sideline. Josh Dobbs is taking snaps from Garrett Bradbury, right? And the offensive line is huddled around him. They're going over the snap cadence, which they've never heard of. By the way, snap cadence, very important to get it right for the quarterback and the offensive line, so the offensive line knows when to move, because if they move too early, it's a false start, and if they move too late, the quarterback gets sacked, right? Because the defensive line gets a jump on the ball. The Vikings offense had the only penalty the Minnesota Vikings had in this game, and I don't know if they had any declined or whatever, but the only penalty the Vikings had in this game was with Jaron Hall, and there was a false start by Dalton Risner with Jaron Hall in the game. They had 0 penalties with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. He only ended up getting sacked 3 times. Now, he escaped a handful of sacks, honestly, so part of that was that, but I think the pass protection was really, really good for them, and there wasn't an issue with getting off on the snap. There was a bobbled snap, right? That's the biggest miscue that the Dobbs offense had outside of, some Dobbs just even getting in the game early on. So he learned the cadence on the sideline. He doesn't know anybody's names. Like, maybe he knows guys' first names, right? It's like, hey, TJ, do this, or hey, Jordan, do whatever, but he barely knows anybody's names. He's got Kevin O'Connell speaking the play calls into his ear. He's got the players being like, yeah, that means I run a corner route, so check that out. And the guys being able to process the play calls, Kevin O'Connell speaks the play calls in the headset. It's a road game, right? So there's got to be some level of crowd noise. I doubt the crowd was raucous, because the Falcons are not very good, and also they weren't playing well in this game. So I doubt it was hard for Dobbs to hear. But then he's got to regurgitate the words. If somebody were to say to me granted, at least it's all English words, right? But if somebody were to say to me a sentence in French, right? I don't speak French. I couldn't repeat that back to you immediately, right? He's got to say the words as they're coming out. Hopefully the players kind of get it right. Some of the play calls are kind of similar. So he's got to regurgitate that, and then he's got to listen to Kevin O'Connell tell him exactly what's going on. One of the things that was said after the game, from what I saw, was that, I think it was on the sideline, I don't think it was while it was in the headset really, but Kevin O'Connell used his knowledge of what words Kirk had called play calls in the Kubiak offense, right, to help translate to Dobbs, who was playing for the Cardinals. And the connection there is Drew Petzig, the Cardinals offensive coordinator, was a former Minnesota Vikings guy. He left with Kevin Stefanski to go to the Browns, right? So Kevin Stefanski has 1 year in the Kubiak system, which is similar to the Shanahan system, right, but not exactly the same. And Kubiak and Shanahan are kind of on a similar page there. The problem is Kevin O'Connell comes from the McVay system, which uses different wordings, because McVay didn't really work with Shanahan all that much. There was a little bit of time in Washington, but really he was kind of a Gruden guy, which is still West Coast, right? That's still like a Bill Walsh tree offense, but because they're different roots, it's different terminologies for everything. So if we call something choice stucco because we have a Shanahan 2018 version of the playbook, O'Connell probably doesn't call that play the exact same thing, even if they have the exact same concept in the playbook. So what O'Connell is trying to do during the course of the game is take the wording he uses and translate it over to what Josh Dobbs uses. I can't even imagine how difficult that could have been, and how weird the connections in football are, right? It's like, all right, Drew Petzig, you're on the staff with Kevin Stefanski, who was with Gary Kubiak for 1 year. Kevin O'Connell I don't think he even worked with McVay in Washington. I think he just worked with Gruden for a year or two in Washington, and then he goes with McVay. So he never worked with Kyle Shanahan before. So that the Kubiak side of the system, right? Shanahan was with Kubiak in Houston with the Houston Texans, that sort of thing. That side of the system, I don't think O'Connell's familiar with the terminology at all because he came up in the Patriot system, the Erhard Perkins system. So it's just like weird connections. I don't know how they were able to get that throughout the game, but just his ability to get Dobbs what he was supposed to do, and then Dobbs' ability to take that on the field. Of course there were misses, and we're going to probably say some critical things about Josh Dobbs over the course of this podcast, right? Like the game wasn't perfect overall, but like understand that the reason we're being critical is because it's something that can get better and something we hope can improve with time, right? We're not trying to be like, oh, the game wasn't 100% perfect, or like, well, actually he was bad in this game. It's more it's absolutely astounding what he was able to do given the resources that he had coming into the game, but also hopefully with time things get better, I think. And I hope I speak for both of us there, Nick.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, there are reasons that I have a lot of questions about Dobbs going forward as the starter. But that has more to do with what I've seen from Dobbs previously and the things that I kind of just think, he doesn't take care of the football. He is not super quick going through his reads, at least compared to Kirk. He can make some poor decisions. He thinks he can do too much with his arm or with his legs, or he'll bail on clean pockets and create pressures on his own. When we saw a few of those things on Sunday, and that can sound very critical, but obviously he also brings the playmaking with him too. And the fact that he was able to do all this, like, it's very cool to see. Like, what a story for him, winning Player of the Week. When he just got here, he got to the Minnesota like on Wednesday before the game. But I really have to just to like, at the risk of repeating myself, like, man, what a coaching job from Kevin O'Connell, because you got 40 seconds between each play call. Now, granted, you got a few seconds after before they start the clock again or whatever when the refs spot the ball, but like in those 40 seconds, Kevin O'Connell has to pick the play, figure out like, okay, here's what we're going to do, and then like get the right personnel on the field for that. And then read the play to Josh Dobbs, which, by the way, the play calls are very complicated. They're not like,
Yes.
okay, we're going to run stick. It's like, okay, 12 north right F control 200 jet X sticks Y spacing or something. Like, that's a play call or something. And then he has to say that, and Josh Dobbs has to repeat it back to the offense. And then he has like 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds to explain to Josh Dobbs what any of that means. And basically just say, okay, like, we're running stick. You might know it as like Y. Like, just look for TJ Hawkinson, who's going to run like 5 feet out or something and run a curl or something. And to be able to like manufacture an offense out of that is insane to me. So like Kevin O'Connell's done a lot of really great things, I think, from a coaching perspective, but I think this was a kind of this is definitely like going to become like part of the Kevin O'Connell legend. Was, remember the Josh Dobbs game when he was translating play calls on the sideline and Josh Dobbs was learning the play snap cadence on the sideline. Just an incredible. I'm so glad they pulled off that fourth quarter comeback, that game-winning drive, because it really allows us to soak in and appreciate just the insanity of what actually happened on Sunday.
Yeah. So, also, by the way, you're getting zero help from your run game all day. Your run game is an abject disaster the entire time. So it's like it was pretty much all on the quarterback, and the defense obviously did help out, especially in the second half with those two back-to-back turnovers. Was pretty critical to help the Vikings, but why don't we get into Josh Dobbs' play, right? We've talked about how impressive it was just overall for him to even be able to function as a quarterback in this game, right? And drop back and occasionally make plays down the field or do things with his legs. We do have to mention the disaster start, I think, right on his first drive. He ends up taking a safety. It's kind of a bad sack. You would have wished he would have at least gotten out of that, climbed out of the end zone on that. Again, really, really tough situation for him to be in.
Yeah, and that drive started on their 7 yard line. So
Yeah.
like basically everything that went wrong could have, like, it's one of those drives where you almost give up before it starts, even without the fact that Josh Dobbs is in there and doesn't know, like he was just born,
Yeah.
doesn't know anything. But yeah, the first drive, they start with like a little, they start with a tackle for loss. Hawkinson runs like a Y option, and he actually throws like a decent ball to Hawkinson on it, but there's defensive pass interference, which isn't called. So you get third and long, third and like 11 or something on your own 5 yard line. And there kind of like isn't much open downfield, and so Dobbs tries to kind of just create, and he runs into the his own edge and gets tackled in the end zone for
Yep.
it. So, and then the second drive they come out and it's 2 tackles for a loss in a row, and then you got like 3rd and 12 again, and he throws a check down on a drag, but like there's defensive pass interference. That one they do call, and then on the next play, they throw a play. And Dobbs doesn't. There's like a guy open coming backside on the dig, but he bails on a clean pocket. And again, I'm not going to
Yep.
blame him for not getting to the second person on his progression when it's like he just got there. He doesn't really know how to read, but he bails on a clean pocket, and as a result, there's a sack and a fumble, which is returned to the 1 yard line. So basically, the first 2 drives go about as badly as possible, from the uncalled passes to the run game getting not even like 0 yards, but negative yardage on like 4 consecutive runs.
Mm-hmm.
The safety and then the fumble that is recovered to the 1 yard line. Basically, everything that could go wrong does go wrong, but ultimately they're able to start clawing back, and that's what kind of made it like a movie. Is like like everything looks terrible at once, and then all of a sudden they start getting into a groove.
Yeah, and the third mishap obviously was a fumble at the beginning of the third quarter. And that one was more on the tackles. They got both of them
Yeah.
got pushed back into Dobbs. It kind of squeezed him, and he was looking to throw the ball, but it gets knocked out of his hands and goes right into a Falcons defender. So that one was a little bit harder. I mean, I guess you want to ask Dobbs to move up there, but again, it's really like he was just shoved into an impossible circumstance. So it's hard to criticize truly any of these things. You hope that they get cleaned up a little bit, and he was a little bit turnover worthy and turnover prone in Arizona. So it's probably important to note that just in terms of projecting moving forward. Like you hope that stuff does clean up as he gets more comfortable in the offense.
I think the fumbles, like that first fumble where he was trying to flip it to, I think it was Oliver. He was just kind of trying to create something out of
Yeah.
nothing, and then got his hand on the ball. I think that's the kind of thing that like that's the roller coaster you're going to ride with Josh Dobbs. He's going to try and make plays, and sometimes his playmaking is going to put the ball in danger. And he's going to
Mhm.
bail on clean pockets occasionally, just because his first read isn't open and he kind of gets happy feet. Um, that's things that I've seen in his tape from prior seasons, prior games, prior teams. But I also feel like he broke 7 tackles in this game and
Yeah.
did some insane things with the ball in his hand as a runner. The play strength, the contact balance, and the speed, the burst, the acceleration, the ability to make guys miss, and like the vision as a runner to like be able to see cutback lanes. Like this is things you expect from a running back, but this guy's a quarterback, but he looks like a running back out there. So a special runner talent with the ball, and not just in terms of speed, but in terms of like total athletic package. In terms of, and that's not to say he's not Cam Newton or anything. He's not like an elite athlete, but he's got a really good ability to make guys miss, both from his play strength, his contact balance, and his ability to sort of set up oncoming blockers and make them take bad angles. So
Well, yeah.
all that will translate in the positive direction too.
Yeah, and let's talk about that running ability. Like his running style, like I don't know, it doesn't look athletic out there to me. Like obviously it is very athletic, but like when you're watching it live, it's like Looney Tunes esque almost. Like it's just like I feel like there are legs going everywhere and he's flying everywhere. And multiple times in this game, a defender had him wrapped up in the backfield and he just completely got out of the wrap. Like he doesn't run like a Kyler Murray or a Lamar where it's like very smooth, right? It's more of like a peak Russell Wilson to me, where like Russ was just doing wild stuff back there all the time. And you're like, how is this working? How can nobody bring him down? That's kind of what I feel like how Josh Dobbs runs, and that's great, right? But like also he showed the acceleration, he showed a little bit of quickness and ability to make guys miss, especially on that 4th and 7 run, right? So he's wrapped up basically by Bud Dupree. He gets out of that, and then he just accelerates past 2 defensive linemen who weren't able to get them, cuts past a defensive back, and kind of has the power to stay up and get pushed out of bounds. I mean, the other long run with that great Cam Akers block on that first 3rd and 11, right? I think that was really his first scramble that he kind of had throughout the game. He has an unblocked blitzer coming from his left, just makes that guy miss and makes something happen, right? It's an overload blitz. It's a zero blitz like we love to run all the time. And the answer there for the offense, like you don't have a lot of good options because the first answer is a quick pass on 3rd and 11. The other team's just going to rally and tackle, right? So when you can beat that with your legs and hurdle over a defender that Cam Akers is absolutely demolished, like, and get the first down somehow flying out of bounds, like that's just crazy. That's just such a value add to the team to have a guy who can scramble like that.
Yeah, and Dobbs was dead to rights there. And if that were Kirk, that's one of the few things that Dobbs does better than Kirk is like on a zero blitz, Kirk 100 times out of 100 throws that check down or that hot route to Brandon Powell on like a short little stick route or whatever it was, and Powell gets tackled and they kick a field goal. And you don't want like Dobbs to ignore the hot route and just try and make magic happen against a hot blitzer who's coming in unblocked, but the fact that he can do that when that happens is a huge value add, and we saw that we saw that on the fourth down, we saw that on that third down scramble, we saw that on the rushing touchdown. He had 7 broken tackles in 7 carries. That's like insane. Like a quarter of that is elite for a running back. So to have 4 times that in one game is insane. So a very special ability. Hopefully, now that they've named him as the starter, they can start building in some more design runs for him.
Yeah.
Use that to enhance the run game. Obviously, I don't think they were planning on doing it because this was a Jaron Hall. They planned for Jaron Hall, and Hall has legs, but he's not a. You wouldn't necessarily design runs for him, but I think you can design runs for Josh Dobbs. So it will be interesting to see if they build that into the playbook for the Saints at all.
Also, just for Dobbs, like we talked about the lack of practice, like a mesh on a read option play is a timing thing and something you need to get down between the running back and the quarterback, right? So not only is that something Kirk's never going to run, so who knows how much they had it installed in the first place, but secondarily, like that can be very disastrous if you don't get that pass off right on the mesh. So I think there's a pretty good reason why that probably wasn't in the offense in that game. Um, Moving on to Dobbs as a passer, I mean there were some things I like here. There was one really bad miss, but there was like that hole shot to Jordan Addison where Addison made the spectacular catch on the final drive. That was awesome. I think there was a lot of him trusting TJ Hawkinson to win, particularly on third downs. And maybe that's like Kevin O'Connell in his ear saying, literally just throw the ball to the tight end. Like, don't feel bad about it. Trust him to win. If he doesn't win, like, that's on me. You know, I made that call, but it's good to see him see that trust, see the kind of outside leverage stuff. And then there were some full field reads that he did. He hit actually, it wasn't a catch, but the Jordan Addison one where he got like, I think he like got punched in the face basically by the defensive back going to punch the ball out. It would have been a drop anyway because he kind of double clutched it, I think. But that was, he opened to his left on the front side, came back to the backside dig and fired it in time. Maybe you want to say it should be half a tick sooner based on the timing, but like it was a really nice progression play to see from somebody who didn't know the offense at all. Like I don't even understand how a quarterback goes in and begins to start to have those progressions and find some of the open receivers that he did. Like the smash concept, the first big play to Addison, like that one's pretty straightforward to me. You know, you just tell the guy like look at the corner and whether or not he squats, and that's an easy read. But there was some other stuff where he found stuff on the backside of plays, which is just mind-boggling to me how he was able to do that.
Yeah, like unfathomable. Like to be able to make a full field read, you need a lot more than just Kevin O'Connell being like, okay, so that by that we mean we're like you need Kevin O'Connell to break down this play for it takes a lot more than 5 to 10 seconds for you to understand like, okay, if they do this in coverage, then your second option will be here, which means you'll be looking to the like to make a full field read means you understood the entire play call and the entire way it's supposed to play out. So like the fact that he was doing this on multiple occasions like blows my mind. He must have like I don't know what he did at halftime, but like apparently he just like he crammed for the exam and then went out there and aced it with the extra credit. So really impressive stuff. You're right that there were more hitches that I'm used to seeing. Granted, I'm used to seeing Kirk Cousins, who's a pretty runs a smooth operation back there, but like. The fact that he was able to get through multiple progressions, his third progression, to do a full field read, to look open left and look right, find backside digs, find backside curls or whatever is like insane to me. So part of that is like impressive given the circumstances. So I don't know to what extent that will he'll become an elite processor or anything going forward. It's not like he was an elite processor on prior teams, or anything. But to be able to do that in the circumstances was insanely impressive from both the coaching staff and also Dobbs himself as a passer.
Yeah, and finally to wrap it up here on Dobbs, there we've talked about it. There were a couple misses. Those are things you hope he gets more comfortable with in the offense. I think the most glaring one was actually a great positive for the Vikings, but it was on his rushing touchdown, right? Where TJ Hawkinson, you're on a fake screen. TJ Hawkinson ends up wide open because they kind of duped the corner on it. You would hope Dobbs throws that into the end zone. He doesn't. He ends up scrambling. He gets a touchdown on the scramble. There's some great downfield blocking from the guys on that play. It's a great play with Dobbs' legs, right? There were a couple other instances where I thought there were open receivers or windows that Dobbs could have thrown into where he doesn't, and he ends up pulling it down or maybe checking down or going somewhere else. Again, for this game, I'm okay with that. I think as we install the offense with him, I hope that he's able to process those things more quickly moving forward and get those right and hit them kind of on target.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe just to put a bow on Dobbs' game, if you turn on the All-22 without really knowing anything, and you don't, you didn't start with the Jaren Hall tape, you would not have known that this was a guy thrust into the fire. It would have looked like competent NFL offense that knew what it was doing. It was not committing penalties. It was not there weren't. It wasn't like Jordan Love running a play where there aren't any routes run. There weren't any crazy miscommunications. There weren't interceptions thrown to nowhere. He was taking care of the ball. He was making progressions. They were the offense looked competent, which is hard to do. People practice for months and months and months and come out and look incompetent. So for them to do that is just, I can't give enough credit to Dobbs and to the coaching staff and everybody involved with that, because it was just absolutely, and to do that on the road where you can't hear people, insane. Completely insane.
He was going up to the line and making checks. There was one play where he clearly audibled into something. And, Kevin O'Connell mentioned he made a couple protection calls throughout the course of the game. Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, I guess you can teach him the words for the protection calls, right? Be like, this word is 5-0 protection. This is half slide right, half slide left. You know what I mean? 200, 300 jet, whatever. But, it's just crazy for him to be able to process all the information that's happening at once. I play Madden and I freeze up post snap, and I predetermined reads all the time where I'm gonna go with the ball based on what the play I called, right? I can't imagine trying to process that in real time as an NFL player. It's just with you not having any of the install or kind of any of the rules instilled in you.
Or knowing who anybody is. You throw up 87 if you ball, hey, 87 is pretty good, and then get to the sideline, oh yeah, actually he's a Pro Bowler. It's
yeah.
The whole story is just bananas to me. Hey, this Addison guy's pretty good. Oh yeah, he was a first round rookie. And wait till you find out who 18 is. He's pretty good too. So.
Yeah. I can't wait until that guy's back. So did want to shout out a couple more players on offense. First of all, Jaren Hall came in. I was excited to evaluate him in this game, and of course we get that taken from us, but I mean, I thought he looked good on his second drive. I mean, he had 11 plays with Jaren Hall in the game, 8 dropbacks, something like that. But it looked like he was operating the offense. He knew where to go with the ball. There were a couple situations where the players were wide open, but for example, that dump off to Josh Oliver, or Johnny Munt rather, that went for 20 yards. He had a guy right in his face immediately. The ability to process and get that ball off is something NFL quarterbacks do. And some quarterbacks in the NFL struggle to do on a consistent basis. So it was good to see from that. He delivered the ball accurately to Madison. I didn't really think there were any negatives from him in this game. So it was nice to see somebody who looked to be in command of the offense, especially for somebody who's a rookie quarterback. And unfortunately, he ends up getting the concussion. Hopefully he's able to get back healthy soon. It'll be interesting to see what the quarterback situation will be once Hall is back healthy. I expect Dobbs to continue to start, honestly, but hopefully we have somebody who can be a legit backup in Hall. It kind of seems like it's leaning that way to me.
Yeah, I was really impressed by him, and it was, you don't want to overreact to a small sample size, but I liked those few plays we saw from him last week, and I liked the dozen or so plays we saw from him this week. Like you said, the thing that struck me most was his command of the offense. Him
Mhm.
regularly going out there and changing the call, checking, killing plays, changing the protections, moving guys. Just very, very comfortable running the full no training wheels Kevin O'Connell offense, which, as we saw, especially with the last couple weeks we saw from Kirk, can get very complicated. You can go out of the huddle with 3 different play calls, all that need to be adjusted depending on what the defense presents and how they adjust things. He was responding to, the Falcons were throwing a few different crazy things at him, and he was responding to, at the snap safety rotations, disguise coverages, different things, responding to the blitz. I liked his pocket presence. Granted, he did. There was that touchdown pass to TJ Hawkinson where he didn't get to it fast enough, and then once he eventually saw Hawkinson, he was climbing the pocket and he kind of flipped him a ball that was too high and uncatchable. And I think if he just resets his feet, he would deliver a touchdown pass to Hawkinson. So he's not like a perfect quarterback. He
Yeah.
doesn't have amazing arm talent. He doesn't have amazing athletic talent. Granted, there's certainly night and day comparisons. Him on a boot looks a lot different than Kirk Cousins on a boot. Just the athleticism. But he has limitations as a quarterback, so maybe you're right to put him in the backup quarterback category. But I liked what I saw from Hall more than I've seen from Nick Mullins, and I thought Nick Mullins was a plus backup too. So it was encouraging. We're
Yeah.
talking about a very, very small sample size here. But the stuff that you saw, I think, the command of the offense, the vision, I thought he showed really good vision to respond to what defenses were doing and to know where to go with the ball,
Yep.
to make reads and stuff. So you're seeing, again, small sample size, but you're seeing a lot of tools that would be projectable if you had more sample size to back up to and really encourage you to feel like, yes, he has accuracy. Yes, he's able to deliver balls under pressure like that back foot throw to Munt. Yes, he's able to make full field reads. Yes, he's able to process the entire offense. So what we saw was he marched all the way down the field, and before he got hurt, it was looking like that would have been like a very, very efficient touchdown drive. So it was encouraging stuff from him. So it sucks that he got hurt, but obviously it allowed the Josh Dobbs game to happen. So we'll be great if we can get him back in there at some point, because it would be great to just evaluate him and be like, can he be an answer? Can you go into next season with him as the starter? I think that's jumping the gun a little bit, but I also, I saw enough from him where I'm like, I'm intrigued. I want to see if
Yeah.
that is if that's a lottery ticket we could buy into, because I wouldn't say definitely no based on what I've seen from him so far. You got to see a lot more, but from what I saw so far, it was really encouraging. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see how the QB situation plays out the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on from Hall, I think the biggest thing that came out of this game from the offense is just how banged up the Vikings ended up being by the end of this game. Christian Darrisaw apparently injured his groin in practice. I think it was a couple days ago, because the initial report that he was questionable came out on Saturday, and then he wasn't able to go for the game. So David Questenberry got the start at left tackle, played pretty well for somebody who kind of was a backup, right? KJ Osborne obviously had a really, really scary injury in the game. It did not look good. He was out for a concussion, so it'll probably be at least a couple weeks, I imagine, given how severe it looked, for him to come back there. That's a little bit, frustrating when you're down your best receiver in Justin Jefferson already. So we have Addison and Powell, and now it was like Tristan Jackson played a lot, which Tristan Jackson, hey, he got that was a really nice catch on that 2-point conversion. Cam Akers, unfortunately, sounds like ruptured his Achilles, so he is out for the season, and it's the second time he's had that injury in his career. I don't know if it was the same foot as the first one, but it just really sucks for him. Somebody who was, making an impact on this team. Obviously, we talked about that absolutely phenomenal block that he had, and I think it was a strong part of the rotation in the backfield. TJ Hawkinson apparently has a rib oblique injury. Like, he went down at one point in the game. I think it was being worked on in the tent, but he came back and, played out the rest of the game. I saw something today where he's like, yeah, I expect to play. Like, the pain was never enough that I wanted to go out of the game last week, which, it just, football player toughness is something I don't understand. So that's impressive. And Brandon Powell, it sounds like it was just cramps for him, but he ended up playing through cramps and literally could not come off the field because they didn't have a wide receiver to put in his place, and ends up catching the game winning touchdown. So Just a lot of guys struggling with injury in this game for the Vikings, but still ended up pulling out the win.
Yeah, luckily, I think reinforcements are coming. Justin Jefferson, maybe he won't be active for the Saints, but I think he'll definitely be active after that. And then Jalen Naylor, much forgotten guy, but I was pretty high on him coming out of the draft, and I'm excited to see if Keenan McCardell has turned him into some
Mm-hmm.
a valuable member of the rotation as well. He was getting a lot of camp hype too, so maybe this will be the week he gets that. He's obviously been on IR for the start of the season, but maybe this is the week he gets activated. So. Yeah, they were dropping like flies out there, which
Yeah.
only adds to the legend of Josh Dobbs.
Yeah.
That he was able to like do this throw into like game-winning touchdown to Brandon Powell, just as like we all drew up back in September with Josh Dobbs to Brandon Powell for NFC Player of the Week. But yeah,
Yeah.
when's this bye week? We really need it because we need to get healthy. But it makes it all the more impressive that the next man up is able to step up and put in good performances.
Yep.
Yeah, the offensive
Crazy
line, I
stuff.
would say the just to touch because you mentioned Quessenberry, like he played well. Trust Chris Cooper, I guess, because every time he trusts some other next guy to come in, like whether it's Reisner or Quessenberry, the backup centers that we've had to play, like they've all filled in admirably. So shout out to Cooper again, who's continued to make this offensive line look surprisingly competent.
Mm-hmm.
Not used to seeing that from Vikings. The pass protection I thought was really good, and it was made more challenging by Josh Dobbs, who does not have the consistency of drops that like Kirk Cousins does because obviously he just got here. But I thought the run blocking was like surprisingly bad. Now, granted, credit to Atlanta's defenders and credit to
Yeah.
Atlanta's scheme. They were sort of slanting, they were moving, they were really trying to block off those reach blocks. But like I also thought like a lot of guys had surprisingly bad days in the office. Like I thought Brian O'Neill had a pretty bad game, which I'm not used
Oh,
to
and
seeing from him.
it wasn't just like one guy. It was like every single guy on the offensive line kind of had multiple losses to me. And to your point, like Brian O'Neill, I charted like I just went through quick because I was like, this run game was horrible. I kind of want to see who I thought was responsible for like the main culprit for it. I thought the running backs read things fine. It was just like the linemen were getting beat pretty consistently. O'Neill had the most losses that I thought impacted the overall run play to me. So it was a pretty poor game from him.
They were able to get like they had that 19-yard duo run where Akers bounced it outside. So like eventually they were able to pull up their like yards per carry up from like the
Mm-hmm.
negatives. But it's just a lot of negative runs, which I'm not used to seeing. And granted, part of that is probably on the road, new quarterback, trying to figure things out. Part of it, I think, is also, Atlanta's scheme, like being like, okay, this is a wide zone team, and they're not going to get too crazy with the snap exchange or whatever. So we just have to, be on our, mind our P's and Q's and jump it so that we don't get reached or anything. But I also think like they've got some dudes up front who are able
Yep.
to like really well lock guys. Like I saw Bradbury like not able to reach one techniques, which I'm not used to seeing that. Like Kentravius Street or whoever, maybe he just had this was like a randomly
They
really good
they
game for
actually
him.
got him at the trade deadline. They got him from
Yeah,
the
from
Eagles
the
at the trade deadline, which is crazy too. Like, but yeah, he played
like
a
you
great game.
it looked really good out there. And 94 too, and their edge defenders too set a hard edge. So yeah, tip your cap to the Falcons. I makes me, I still think the Vikings have a really good run blocking team, but it was weird because they've been so efficient blocking the ball, and this game they were obviously not. So maybe just wanted to put a little bit of an extra gloss on why didn't the run game get anything going all game. And I think part of it was scheme, and I think part of it was just randomly people weren't playing at the level we expected them to from how well they've been playing the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like straight up, the reason the run game wasn't good in this game was because they got their asses kicked up front all
Yeah.
day, up and down the field by the Falcons defensive line. And to credit the Falcons, like they have the number one run defense by EPA per play. They had the number one run defense by EPA per play coming into this game. So I guess it really shouldn't have been a surprise. It kind of snuck up on me a little bit how much of a negative that was. But when one of your edge defenders is Calais Campbell, like you're probably not going to rush the passer all that well, but you certainly are going to be able to beat guys up against the run, and they
Yeah.
did do that in this game. So with that being said, on the offense, I think that pretty much wraps it up on that side of the ball. Like, Addison made a couple great catches. It's great that TJ Hawkinson got open and did some third down stuff, but really, I think the story of the game is Josh Dobbs on the offense, right? on the defensive side of the ball, the most dominant player on the defensive side of the ball all game. He didn't get a sack, but he leads the NFL in sacks, and he just killed the Falcons' run game, play in and play out. Was Danielle Hunter. Like, I thought he was absolutely awesome in this game. Just the goal line play when the Falcons ended up kicking a field goal when they started after that one Josh Dobbs fumble that got them down to the one, where Hunter literally takes, I think it was a guard too. It might have been a tight end. I don't really remember offhand. But the player who was blocking him and throws him back into the running back Tyler Algier and knocks Algier off his path, and it's like a 3 or 4 yard loss that other guys clean up. Like, that just exemplified to me how Hunter played in this game.
Yeah, really good job by the defense. They did let up one big Jonnu Smith screen touchdown, and then they also had that one bad drive where they just kind of kept converting on third and longs and were able to generate a lot of successful runs. So like 2 bad drives, but like they also like got like there were like 13 drives. So other than that, they were kicking a lot of butt. The Falcons were able to obviously put up 28 points, but 2 of those drives started one of those drives started on the 1 yard line and resulted in negative yards. The one you were just talking about, which maybe just
one of the other field goal drives started in negative yards too after a fumble by the Viking. The other Josh Dobbs fumble. So like, yeah.
On that drive that started at the 1 yard line, I thought it was a really, really impressive stuff from Brian Flores. One, they start out on the 1 yard line, and the defense, I've never seen this, but the defense like schematically like schemed the Falcons into a false start, because what they did is they had a 1 technique and a 2-eye at the snap, and like very right as this clock was switching down, they like very suddenly jerked out and moved to like 3 techniques, and that caused the right guard to like jump because he thought they were like jumping the snap, but no, it's illegal. You're allowed to like move around your techniques
Shift laterally, yeah.
And he hitched because he thought like, oh, I got it. Like, so when you're on the 1 yard line, you really have to like get in there to like get ready to punch your guy. So I thought that was like a very clever way to like bait a very, very meaningful penalty. And then after that, like we kind of get the Arthur Smith special where it's a tunnel screen to Jonnu Smith, which was actually a nice design because, you know, that's a good beater. I know people like to beat up on Arthur Smith. I actually feel like, taking a step back, Arthur Smith designed a pretty good game.
He designs plays well. I don't think people have much of an issue with his play designs specifically. I think it's everything else in terms of personnel usage and how he handles the media that he really gets crap for.
Yeah. So they get that tunnel screens, the 3x1, they get numbers, and then they throw it quick, which is a great look to beat cover 0. But Tonga this time was able to recognize it. Tonga was the guy who wasn't really able to recognize it fast enough on the second Jonnu Smith touchdown. And then you get the Jonnu Smith jet sweep, which is probably too galaxy brain for me, but they're able to sniff it out. Hunter is able to stop that one too. And then you got the one where you talked about where it's like kind of mid zone with a Y coming across strong and also a fullback. So you're kind of just getting all the horses up there to push a hole through. And Danielle Hunter beats one tight end and then bench presses Jonnu Smith into Tyler Algier. And then Bynum and Metellus and friends are able to wrap up for a tackle for a loss. Like, that's an insane performance, like a goal line stand, to start at your own 1 yard line and push them back for negative yards. So overall, that was like one microcosm of the kind of defensive performance they put together. There's still things we got to work on. You know, like I feel like more and more you got to make sure you're rallying and your edge defenders and linemen are reacting once they see guys pulling on those screen plays. Like Wanham, Harrison Smith, they all kind of blitzed on that Jonnu Smith touchdown, and that left Metellus like 1 versus 4.
I will say I think that Jonnu Smith touchdown was a really good design by the Falcons, because they got out of there immediately, and like it was a mishandled throw by Heineke away from being illegal man downfield, like ineligible receiver downfield, because the way the center got off the ball there, he was 2 steps downfield and his back foot was 1 yard downfield. Like he was 1.5 yards downfield, right? Not quite 2 yards, but he was 1.5 yards downfield by the time that ball got off. And it just allowed the lineman to get out there. The Vikings defensive line didn't really recognize it in time to get back and make the play. To your point, like they took a step forward at the snap and they were kind of dead to rights in that situation. So The thing that doesn't really concern me too much is the Vikings really haven't got on screens like that so far this year. I mean, if you want to say there have been 3 explosives off of screen like plays against the Vikings to me. One was the trick play in the Chargers game, right, where they faked a screen, everybody bites on it, and they go deep over the top. The other was a Christian McCaffrey touchdown in the game against the 49ers, where like they motioned McCaffrey across the formation. Byron Murphy's running to try to keep up with McCaffrey, and he can't quite do it, and they get good blocks on the edge. And then this Jonnu Smith one. And like teams run a ton of perimeter screens against this team, right? Because of the way we blitz. So it's not a major concern to me, but it is kind of the high variance way the defense is going to work when you get blitz. Like occasionally somebody's going to get a good one on you in that scenario.
Yeah, and Flores has done a great job limiting explosives. That's one of the great things about his scheme, but that's also the risk of running cover zero, particularly when they're in, it was a 60-yard touchdown. It's one thing to run cover zero in the red zone because, like, what's the worst thing you can do is you get a 20-yard touchdown. Not the worst thing in the world when they've already marched that far down the field. It's another thing to do it when they're on their own 40-yard line and they get a 60-yard touchdown and they bust it loose. So obviously that hurt a lot, but I also think that's pretty fixable. That one doesn't concern me as much. One thing that does concern me, just talking scheme-wise, is there were a lot of big plays where it was just they were finding soft spots in zones. And part of that was, I think part of that was Arthur Smith design, like kind of knowing how to beat this Brian Flores defense. Like there were times they would drop back to cover 2 or cover 3, and I don't really know what you call this route, which is usually a good sign that somebody's doing something smart schematically, but they would like start inside the numbers and then just sort of sprint out and stop, like almost like a fade route. And like Taylor Heineke, by the time they stopped, like the ball would already be in midair, and it's just like you're kind of just finding like that dead zone to the outside of the high safety or whatever. They did it on multiple occasions for like a 20-yard gain, which is like it looks very simple, but if you know that the safety's dropping to their landmarks and they're going to hit their landmarks first before responding to that route, it's kind of like a clever way to just sort of pick up a free 20 yards, 15 yards, or whatever. They did it twice in that game. There was a couple other times where they were just sort of like glance route underneath. There was an explosive they got where like Wanham was the guy who was dropping back into coverage, and they were just sort of able to fit a route underneath it. So I think Hicks had another one too where he didn't match with the guy behind him. So the way they play these spot drop zones gives me concern about the defense going forward in a way that like I think the Jonnu Smith thing is fixable. I think knowing how to read quarterbacks and route distributions better is like really hard. It's like part of what makes Fred Warner really good, but there aren't many Fred Warners in the NFL. So that does give me some concern, but overall I think it was a very good defensive performance, particularly the run defense, particularly Danielle Hunter. We'll shout out a couple of guys here too, but that was the one thing that I was like, that's something that I think will be hard, should be worked on, but might be hard to fix.
So to me, like a couple of those plays, honestly, a couple of the pretty successful plays for the Falcons to me were on a Caleb Evans. Like he had the great punch out on the fumble and he did a great job tackling, but he's just kind of playing soft, especially when he has to drop into a deep third zone where he ends up letting up pretty significant gains underneath of him. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. I thought Mekhi Blackman actually had maybe his best game of the year. Like I have seen Mekhi do some of those things in previous games where I wasn't super thrilled with him, particularly in the Chargers game. I thought he had a pretty bad game. But in this game, I thought he played really well. I thought Byron Murphy was absolutely lights out. Like he was on the ball so many times. There were like I counted like 6 plays that Taylor Heineke really should have thrown a pick on in this game, right? He only ended up throwing the one. And it was like he didn't throw picks on the plays because he just missed the throws so badly that the guy couldn't even intercept them. Like it was so weird to me, right? That it's like, oh, Byron Murphy was actually in really good position on this play, and had Taylor Heineke thrown an accurate pass, it would have been an interception. Or Cam Bynum had one of those too, where I think, and then there was one out of bounds that might have been a Harrison Smith one, but basically it was Murphy and the safeties that really had those opportunities. in terms of spot drop stuff, I think that's just kind of what we're going to live with, right? Like Flores clearly isn't comfortable with the corners and with the guys that we have playing a ton of man coverage, which is something he did a lot more in Miami when he had, Xavier Howard and Byron Jones there, who were like top level man corners. So, I think to me it's just a sign that this isn't an elite defense. Like, it's a good defense, I think, and a lot of that is the scheme and how Flores is attacking opposing offenses, right? Because really he's attacking opposing offenses with all the blitzes and stuff. And he's dialed back the blitz in the last couple games, but I think he's done so intentionally because the quarterbacks that he's going against had a terrible time. Like, they had a really difficult time diagnosing those zones on a consistent basis. The Falcons hit a couple things that were wide open, but more often Taylor Heineke was throwing to covered players, in my opinion.
Yeah. And watching, this isn't a Falcon specific comment, but like one thing I really appreciate from Brian Flores and the kind of the beauty of his scheme, from seeing it for half of an NFL season up close now, is like it's on defense, you're so reactive, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
Donatel defense was so reactive. It was, present you guys punch first, and we'll go from there. You guys in chess, you're a pace up or whatever. And Flores is like, no, we attack first. And the beautiful thing about it is it really simplifies offenses for you. If you know the ball is going to be out in under 2.5 seconds, it just really simplifies the world of things that your defense can worry about. Like, if you know
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to see a lot of quick screens, we're going to see a lot of like hole shot or fade routes or whatever, because that's how you attack zero looks or whatever. It really simplifies things, and it allows, like, the defense isn't super complicated. They'll run a lot of that fire zone stuff, and when they're doing spot drop stuff, it'll be like Tampa 2, cover 3, cover 2, or whatever. It's not the like most complicated thing in the world, but I really appreciate, like, in the Chargers game, like, the last thing you want Justin Herbert is to have, 3.5 seconds to diagnose your defense and
Sure.
be able to run all kinds of things on you. So be able to force them into quick game, and to force them into screens, and to force them into, like, to really reduce the universe of things they could be throwing at you is like so valuable for a defense. And I think it's kind of such a great way to get a good or an average defense out of a below average defensive talent, particularly in the back seven, with this team, because, like, um, they're not. If you ran cover one all day with this defense, it would be a very bad defense. But if you are generating instant pressure and forcing them to throw hot over and over and over again, you can kind of know what's coming, and thereby have a plan to stop it. So I hope we are able to convince teams to not hire away Brian Flores, because what he's done with his defense this year, with not a lot, a lot of Josh Metellis's and Mekhi Blackman's and just randos has been super impressive.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, ultimately, like, the Chargers did have a great game plan for the Vikings defense, right? And if you get that ultra elite processor quarterback that Justin Herbert is, like, there are ways to attack this defense over and over and over again. And it was just so precise in how he attacked it. Um, but even high level quarterbacks with high level offensive schemes, like, can struggle against it, right? Like Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, I mean, they hit the two big plays to Devontae Smith, right? But otherwise, they were just terrible in the passing game.
Yeah.
They dominated the Vikings on the ground. That's a whole nother topic. But, like, the way the Vikings have played defenses has confounded even good quarterbacks, and it's really, really effective, and it's shown to be really effective against bad quarterbacks, right? The Bears game, the Panthers game, not the 49ers game, the Packers game, I think all really, and the 49ers actually had pretty good offense against us. They turned the ball over a few times, but, like, they were very efficient outside of the turnovers that they had in that game. They were averaging like 8 yards per play or something stupid like that. Um, but so there are ways to exploit this defense, but you have to have a really quality coach and quarterback combination, I think, to be able to do so. So that's nice. Couple players we just wanted to shout out before moving on, I think, are Harrison Phillips, number one for me. Like, he just continues to be super stout in run defense. There was a back-to-back play sequence where he just locked out, I think it was Chris Lindstrom on one play, or maybe it was the left guard, I forget, and the center on the other play, and he just dominated, ended up getting a run tackle and kind of a run stop on both of those plays. And then Ivan Pace and Jaquelin Roy in terms of two rookies. Jaquelin Roy played 7 snaps in this game. He had a splash run play where he got in the backfield, and I don't think he made the tackle, but a couple other guys cleaned it up for a tackle for loss, or maybe it was a tackle for no gain, or that sort of thing. Like, the running backs are good at getting back to at least the line of scrimmage, right? And then Ivan Pace, like, 2 ridiculous plays once again. One, he works through traffic. In that situation, the running back had the ball and had 2 offensive linemen in front of him, and Ivan Pace got past both offensive linemen and made the tackle. And then the other was on the Hicks sack, the Vikings' only sack of the game. Pace took out 2 offensive linemen on his rush, just wasn't able to wrap Heineke and bring him to the ground, but Hicks finished it up. Like, he's just a missile out there, and moving forward, he's been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the blitz was insane because he hits the left guard in the center, and I actually think the left guard trips and the center kind of the momentum takes him back.
I looked at the left guard on that play. I'm sorry. One of the players, the player who was near the other offensive lineman, did not trip. They did not knock feet. So he just knocked him back.
But the fact that Pace is able to not just knock these 2 guys over, but also stay upright himself, like, that's the most insane thing to me. It's like contact balance, but like for a defender, he's like somehow he's able to always stay on his feet even when everybody else is falling over around him. Maybe it's being low to the ground and stout, but
I don't know when he fell to the ground, because he fell to the ground a lot in college. He got up immediately. Like, he doesn't lose speed while working his way back up too. It's really nuts.
But that was obviously he's an insane goblin when it comes to like pass rushing. But that jet sweep that he stopped, like, was I had to watch it like 10 times to have any idea how in the world he did that, because the Falcons come out and they do this jet sweep where everybody's pulling. They've got the left guard and the left tackle pulling, and they also had like a running back as kind of like a fullback lead on the play, all like pulling out to the wide side of the field. And the skill player taking the sweep the sweep run, and Wanham and Metellus both get sealed inside, so it's kind of like it should have been a very explosive run, but Pace sees the left tackle and the left guard coming, and he just kind of like dips his shoulder around the left tackle, and he gets hit. Like, he gets an offensive lineman shoving him, but he just sort of absorbs the contact, keeps going, and is able to like bend and redirect like he's Von Miller or something around the left tackle and get his hand on the ball carrier, and able to sort of make a shoestring tackle that like brings him down to the ground. Like, he had a convoy, and he's like just this heat-seeking missile that's like, screw your convoy, I'm just going to like magically teleport around them and get a tackle. It was an absolutely insane run stop. So for him to be able to do that, despite like him being an undersized linebacker against multiple offensive linemen, to me is just really insane. He's a very special player. I mean, he's a developing rookie, and as good as he is in run defense and in coverage, he has limitations from his size in run defense, and he is still learning in coverage. But just a very special player and a lot of fun to watch. Like, I used to think like Eric Kendricks played with his hair on fire, but like Pace makes Kendricks look like the most staid, relaxed guy out there, because Pace is he's also always at the ball, like regardless of like who gets tackled and where, like Pace will be in the dog pile at the very end of it. It's just like launching into it. So a really fun player who plays with a lot of heart and a lot of like chaos. So just the plays that he's able to make, I'm always having to like play them 10 times to be like, how the hell did he do that? So really fun player.
Yeah, no, really, really great stuff when he gets on the field. And he's not a complete linebacker at this point, right? Like, he's not somebody you want to be using in coverage. That's why he doesn't play a ton of snaps. Because I think he only had like 17, maybe up to 20 something snaps in this game. Like, but they found a great role for him, and he's been awesome in it. So I really like seeing that. Why don't we wrap up the Falcons game at that point, I think, Nick, and move over to the Saints game, if that's good with you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so Saints, quality defense, they have a very similar defensive scheme to the Atlanta Falcons, but I think better talent across the board kind of on their defense, and you know, it's pretty familiar talent. They've been keeping the same guys for year after year after year. Obviously, the Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen came from the Saints, you know, worked under Dennis Allen, who's their head coach for many years. So the Saints are ninth in defensive DVOA, sixth in EPA per play. They have, you know, a better secondary to me than the Falcons do in particular. Like up front, they have Cameron Jordan, who I think is healthy. Like I haven't heard a ton about him this year, but I think he's still playing at a pretty high level. And then is it Carl Granderson, who's their other edge rusher, who they signed to an extension, who's actually playing really, really well? Like he is somebody who they developed over the course of time, and has turned into a really good player. So they've got that up front. They've still got Demario Davis at the linebacker level, who's still playing at a high level linebacker. And then they have Marshawn Lattimore, right? They're shut down number one corner with Paulson Adebo, I think, is their other corner, or one of their primary corners. And then I honestly, I guess Tyrann Mathieu plays for them still, so I can't really tell you who the safeties are off the cuff here. But just a pretty high level defense. It'll be interesting to see how the Vikings are able to attack that. They've been able to get after pretty much all the defenses they've been playing, so we'll see if they're able to continue that trend with Josh Dobbs having kind of a week to prepare.
Yeah, no, they're a really good defense. They're a well-coached defense. I think ever since Dennis Allen kind of emerged in New Orleans, he's been able to do really good things. And they're a bit of an older veteran defense. I mean, Cam Jordan's still around, kicking around at like almost 35 years old. But they're all playing at a high level, and the fact that they've played together for so long, kind of like the later Zimmer years. It's a very mature defense who communicates well. They're also a defense that they major in man coverage, and they have the horses to run with man coverage. So that'll be a challenge because I feel like you haven't seen that a lot. You haven't seen, Marshawn Lattimore, big, long corner, strong corner, feisty corner. That if he matches up with Addison, I think that's advantage Lattimore all day, just because of, Addison will still get his, but he's not ready for like NFL shadow, press man coverage all day against a feisty physical corner. Hawkinson, I don't know if Matthew would match up with him, but this is a team that will try and match up and take out your weapons. So it'll be interesting to see if they go, if they do like a true shadow coverage, or if the Saints just are matching it up. It could be a big Hawkinson game if he gets matched up on the linebackers, because that's always a mismatch. Tyrann Mathieu is like, Honey Badger is one of the better tight end erasers, I feel like, and when you're talking about safeties who can play man coverage. So, and then the two edge defenders both set a very hard, heavy edge. Kind of the prototypical power rushers, but they also can get after the quarterback too. So I have a lot of respect for this defense, and they're continuing to play well. But I think I guess it'll be interesting to see throwing the monkey wrench of Josh Dobbs planning for his offense. Like Kevin O'Connell, obviously coming off a very strong coaching performance. It'll be interesting to see how exactly they want to attack this thing. I don't think there's necessarily a good answer, but if Hawkinson and Matthew is the matchup, and Lattimore and Addison is the matchup, then maybe it's your next man up. Whether that's if Osborne is still in concussion protocol, presumably would that be? Is this another Brandon Powell game? Is this a Jalen Naylor game? Or are they just going to take their matchups with Addison and Hawkinson and try and continue to power the engine through those two guys as they have been so far? And that's probably the way they go.
Yeah.
And obviously you want to mix in some run defense too, but this isn't an easy defense to run against either. Playing man coverage allows you to play a lot of one gap and not be out gapped. So if you throw in Josh Dobbs into the run game, maybe that gives you a little bit of an advantage if you're able to be +1 from having the quarterback and having to account for him in the fit. But otherwise, I feel like this is going to be schematically probably the biggest challenge yet. And I say that for the rest of the season for the Vikings, at least defense versus their offense, particularly when you can consider the fact that all the guys that are banged up. So yeah, it's a tough challenge. The offensive side of the ball is a different question, but their defense is good and will be a good challenge.
Yeah, like I think probably the 49ers was a more difficult game on paper, but you have Kirk Cousins in that game, and Kirk operated at an extremely, extremely high level. Like, I don't think we're going to be able to expect Dobbs with a week of practice to be able to do what Kirk did in that 49ers game. So it'll be interesting to see what the Vikings are able to do to try to help create separation for players. Like, to your point, I think Lattimore, if he ends up shadowing Addison, or if they end up with Addison against him on a significant basis, is probably going to be able to swallow him up a little bit in press. Like, he's a big physical, but also fast enough and quick enough corner to stick with Addison throughout the course of the game. So that's definitely a bit of a concern with the matchup. I do think Honey Badger is a little bit past his prime there, so I think TJ Hawkinson can probably get something, but the Saints also have a pair of really, really good cover linebackers. I mentioned Demario Davis earlier. Pete Warner was a name I forgot, who's been a really good player for them. He's still on his rookie deal, but I think he's played really well over the past couple of years. I will say Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor, who are their other two corners, are probably a little bit more exploitable. So if you can get a better matchup with Addison on one of those two guys, they both strike me as more physical players. But that's kind of where you might be able to exploit the Saints defense maybe a little bit if you're able to get that there. Otherwise, it's just a very solid roster top to bottom. Another thing about that defense is they lead the league in turnovers forced, right? The Vikings have been a very turnover prone offense this season. Obviously, we had 2 turnovers last week as well. Josh Dobbs was pretty turnover prone in Arizona. Like, I don't think that that's something that necessarily goes away, now that he has a much better supporting cast than they had in Arizona around him. But I still think he's probably going to put the ball in harm's way a little bit, especially still getting acclimated to this offense, right? So turnovers, if you turn the ball over and lose that turnover battle, you're putting yourself very much behind the 8 ball in terms of winning a football game. So we'll see if they can avoid that in this game. If we flip it over to the offensive side of the ball, like, I think the Saints on paper on offense are a lot better than they have been in practice, right? Derek Carr, you're like, okay, this is a pretty good, competent QB, and I think that's what they wanted to bring in, right? Somebody who's a competent QB who can give them quality starting quarterback play, but I don't think it's materialized quite in the way they expected it to. And I think part of that does have to do with the offensive line and protection. Like, Trevor Penning, who's their first round pick 2 years ago, has been kind of a dumpster fire. I don't know. I think he might have gotten injured. I'm not sure if he is still playing as often. No, he only has 60-something% of the snaps. So James Hurst might be playing at tackle there for them. Andres Pete has been kind of a weak point for years. Eric McCoy, Ryan Ramczyk, those guys are really good on that offensive line. So they kind of have some weak points and some strong points. If Carr doesn't feel comfortable in the offense, then that's obviously a win for the Vikings. And we're going to be blitzing him a lot in this game, is what I would imagine. From perimeter weapons, I mean, I think Chris Olave is awesome. He is my favorite receiver from that class still. Like, I had him over Garrett Wilson. I feel like last year I had him over Garrett Wilson. I think Chris Olave is a great player, but the chemistry doesn't seem to have been there. Now, that may be me reading into that primetime game that they were on, where, like, Derek Carr was, like, screaming at Chris Olave and was like, why aren't you giving effort, right? But that may be me reading a little bit too much into that. Michael Thomas has not been a high-level producer. Maybe he's not up there as a receiver, but Rashid Shaheed is a fantastic deep threat, right? I mean, it seems like a couple plays of the game, he just takes the top off of the defense and scores a touchdown. Like, every other game, he kind of has, like, that 40-plus yard touchdown, which is pretty absurd. So I like their weapons in the passing game. Taysom Hill is just, like, annoying to have to play against. I don't really know of a better way to describe him.
For everything. Yeah.
Derek Carr loves
and running back,
yeah.
wide out.
Yeah, well, like I think the ideal scenario for the Vikings, who as good of a player as Alvin Kamara is if Derek Carr wants to check the ball down to him like 16 times or whatever that he has gotten into sometimes this year. That's just not an efficient way to move the ball down the field, and the Vikings have done a great job rallying and tackling running back and quick game stuff. So if the response to the Vikings blitz looks by the Saints is let's run quick stuff and particularly try to dump the ball off to Alvin Kamara, I think that that's very much a win for the Vikings in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Pete Carmichael, I'm telling Derek Carr to chuck it deep to Olave and Shaheed, every opportunity, just like run those deep routes or, deep option routes or whatever, try and get the post with leverage or whatever against your cover zero look. But if I'm Derek Carr, I'm not throwing those because I'm Derek Carr. So, if I can talk and now watch, he's gonna like light us up for 5 deep touchdowns on Sunday. But yeah, I would expect a lot of blitzing because Carr is he's kind of grown out of this a little bit, but like he was always kind of like more of a skittish quarterback under pressure. And I feel like Kamara is somebody who he's very comfortable checking it down to, and I think Flores is very, very happy to just sort of rally and tackle to Kamara in the flat or whatever. So that's what I would expect to see. They do have weapons. Taysom Hill is probably going to be good for one crazy scat back play, but it's I'm more scared. I think it's a good defense, a good test. I'm scared of the talent they have on defense and how well coached they are. The offense, I think, is competent, and I can imagine lots of ways in which they can beat the crap out of us. But I have a little more confidence with Brian Flores going up against them and everything he can throw at them. So should be a good test.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like this game may turn into a defensive struggle, right? Where the Vikings aren't able to get a lot going on offense with that quality Saints defense, and the Saints kind of do a check down fest. I don't know. Their offense has kind of been up and down throughout the season. I feel like it's really struggled in some situations where I expected it to succeed. So with all that being said, do you have anything else on the Saints before we wrap it up and get out of here, Nick?
The Vikings, I think, are home dogs for it, which is a little surprising. And maybe not when you consider that Josh Dobbs is in there, but the Vikings have strong home field advantage. It's a good environment to play in as a home team. So, +3 or plus 2.5 maybe right now, depending on where you're looking. So, yeah, I guess the Sharps are not very confident about the Vikings, and I understand that. One, I think the Saints are probably a little bit. It's funny that they have the same record. Both teams are 5-4, but I think the Saints are a little bit more complete and competent and well coached and in a position to do things right now.
Well, the Vikings are definitely more well coached than the Saints, but I think the Saints overall as a team have like more talent.
Yeah, no, you're right. Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are one of the best two, offensive defensive play caller pairings in the NFL right now. But I just this Vikings team is reeling. They're scrambling. I would hate to be, the Vikings quarterbacks coach right now, sitting down with Josh Dobbs, being like, okay, you just learned like basic algebra. Now here's like advanced AP calculus to like figure out here's how the offense works and here's how it's going to have to be applied to everything that the Saints throw at you. Which, by the way, I mentioned there, like they major in man, but they throw a lot of crazy stuff in there too. So it's going to be a good challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year Great Vibes got us to 13-4, and then it kind of fell apart in the playoffs, right? Like vibes probably can only get you so far. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Like the team was vibes last week and they ended up winning a crazy game. So I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth there, right? But like at some point, the injuries probably so far this year are gonna catch up to us, and it's gonna put up maybe a bit more disappointing game than we would hope for. Let's hope it's not this week.
Not having Justin Jefferson on the field is going to make them a worse team.
Yeah. So, like, let's hope it doesn't happen this week against the Saints. Like, this is kind of a toss-up in my head. I would probably lean Saints if I had to pick it right now. Just because, like, man, it's so hard for a quarterback to come in and do what Josh Dobbs did last week. Like, it's mind-boggling. It's also really hard for a quarterback to come in and have 1 week of practice and start and play well, right? So, like, last week was amazing. We probably got a little bit lucky, all things told, that things went our way, right? I don't know if we can count on that for this week. So that's a little bit of a downer there, but this team is so much fun, and I'm glad we went out to get Josh Dobbs to remain a serious football team, right? Like, if we had called Sean Mannion up from the practice squad to back up Jaron Hall and had to deal with watching Sean Mannion, it would have been infuriating, right? So
you would not be listening to this podcast right now. We would all be
No.
tuning the Vikings out. And instead, we're getting very entertaining football product for the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy the good vibes as long as they last.
Absolutely. And I think that's the major takeaway we should have from the Falcons game. Probably the Vikings aren't going to be a serious competitor in the playoffs, right? But they're going to be fun, or they're going to be interesting. And that's what we should be rooting for from here on out. So with that, I think we're going to get out of here. I'm Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He's Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host Greg is at You've Been Gregged. We're Kindred Skulls. You can find us at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, Skull Vikings.
Bye, we love you. Cool, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.